Hi,
Yeah.
welcome to Fiberchats. My name is Irina. I'm the host here. My guest today comes from Netherlands, Theo Rooden. Hi, Theo.
Hi there. Yeah.
Welcome to Fiberchats. So I saw your account on Instagram, and the very first thing that caught my attention is that enormous loom that you have in your studio.
Okay. Yeah.
I'm sure that's not how you started. So tell me about how you started weaving and how you got to that big loom.
Yeah, sure. That big loom is something that I used to impress people, but that was not the start.
It's
Just
working.
it came on the path. So where the journey, let's say where the weaving journey started, that was kind of 5 years ago. And I often get the question, what made you decide to start weaving? But I just can't remember. It was just that here in Rotterdam, there was this workshop on weaving. And spontaneously, I thought, let's go there and try it out. Because I hadn't worked with fibers a lot. I can think why it would interest me with all my addiction to patterns and things. And I just went there for this workshop. I sat on quite a big floor loom already in that school, and I was hooked the minute I sat there, and I knew, well, that's very interesting. And then I decided to try to master the technique. So I went into education, got my first floor loom, and then let's say about a year ago, I got that impressive big damask loom as a second loom.
Well, when I'm looking at things you weave, it's not like very typical, like you don't see that anyplace else. And I was looking through your Instagram account and through your blog, and it's basically like you're showing a lot of pictures of shadows that like different everyday life objects make. How those ideas pop into your mind? Like, how do you find those inspirations?
Yeah, okay, that's an interesting question, because I think as a visual artist, a weaver, an artist, I need to find my own signature and my own handwriting in weaving. And a big advantage for me was that I had been a graphic designer and a visual artist for years before I started weaving. So when I got all these new techniques in weaving, I immediately could think, oh, there's potential in this weaving technique for me. So I was not after, let's say, mimicking existing patterns or starting from, let's say, handbooks with patterns. I tried to grasp the technique, and then I learned from my own vocabulary of pictures that I took before and designs that I made before. And I was thinking, how can I, let's say, translate these into a fabric? And like you mentioned, the topic of shadows, well, that was something that I was fascinated already with in my photography and with other artworks. And then I was trying to see whether I could find a technique that fit there. So I could, let's say, challenge the flatness of the fabric and, let's say, make some illusionary shadows in the weaving. And with my knowledge of the techniques of weaving, I could pick certain techniques which then, let's say, I could bring in balance with my own style.
Well, when you first started with weaving, did you have an idea in mind that you want to exhibit in museums, that you want to be in art galleries? Like, what was your vision of where you're going to take that?
Yeah, well, I started as a designer, and then I moved more into autonomous art, which I was quite happy with, but I had some, let's say, I had two difficulties there. I had one difficulty with the immense freedom. You can make anything. There's no constraints. There's no boundaries. That was a bit of a difficulty for me. And it was a bit difficult for me to have, let's say, a story with my artworks. I always had the ambition to, let's say, go to the galleries and things like that. But it's like I have my own fascinations, but I don't really have kind of like a story where how would I like to change the world with my art, or what opinions do I have and how do I translate these into artworks. Like my fascinations are more like on form and color and working within constraints as a designer. So that's when I think the weaving attracted me, because I went a bit from, let's say, arts to crafts. And I was even thinking maybe I should make functional weavings. Like maybe you saw on my Instagram that I make some rugs, and I started with shawls and with towels and all these things. But gradually I'm moving again back into the arts, because I just want to make the things that I find aesthetically pleasing. So it's mainly wall hangings at the moment. But now with a story where I work with form and with color, and I balance that with techniques of weaving. And that's what I'm happy with at the moment.
Well, you know how, like, if you go to a concert, let's say you listen to some symphony written by a composer long gone. You have your own idea in your head of like what this music was about, and it might have nothing to do with what composer was thinking when he was writing that music, but you create your own story to any piece you hear. Do you feel like when people see your pieces of art, they decide for themselves what it's about, or do you feel like it's your role as an artist to tell them what you were thinking when you were creating it?
I know, yeah. Now, for me, it should be open. I think, let's say, one of the characteristics of good art is that it's open for people's own associations. And I may have, let's say, my own story with the artwork, but I'd rather not tell too much of that. If people really want to know, I can tell a bit more maybe, but it's open for their own associations. So yeah, now I'm happy that people see their own things or have their own associations or memories that pop up in their mind when they see my artworks.
When you do your art, like I saw that you like to create series. You're
Yeah,
not
sure.
just doing one piece, you like to do like different variations of the same theme. Is that easier or more difficult because like you have to show more creativity within the same technique?
No, I really like it to work with series and to let's say explore all these variants with my rules and my algorithms. And before I wove, I worked with techniques which are much quicker. So then so for instance, I worked with dies and I made configurations of dies, and then I knew, okay, that's kind of, let's say, 140 variants that might work, and then I could just try them out by laying out these dies on the table and see what worked and what didn't work, and then I made a selection, and I made a few artworks that I think were okay. Whereas with weaving is very slow, and I cannot make all the variants. So I have my ideas, and I make a lot of variants on the computer, and then I decide which I think work best, and then I weave some of them which I think are the most interesting. Yeah, but I really like to try them all out on the computer screen and see, yeah, what possibilities there are within a certain color spectrum or with a certain, let's say, composition that I decided beforehand, and I see how the variations play out.
You ever surprised by the result, like you weave something and you had like an image in your mind of what it's going to look like and it's coming up as something else? Or
yeah, sure. So yeah, so and that's all. Well, first is that I think, oh, these colors will work, and then I make it on the screen, and sometimes there's already disappointment or positive surprise. And also because I work with the front and the back of my fabric, which has a different pattern, there's always already a surprise on the screen, and then I need to throw ideas away. But yeah, even more interesting is, I think, is then when I've designed it on the computer screen, there's always surprise on the loom, because the colors, they are, let's say, mixed, like a painter mixes the paints, but as you know, with yarn, you get the mixture of colors by, let's say, interweaving threads, and they make new colors. So there's always a surprise on the loom. Also, the way the structure that it decides, there's always surprises, but that makes it fascinating, I think. If, let's say, it comes out exactly the way I designed it on the computer screen, then why make a textile? Why not make a print of the thing that you designed on the computer? So there's always curiosity, how, let's say, my design, how it will play out when it's on the loom and when it becomes a real fabric. Yeah, there's always surprise. But I can rather well predict whether it will work well or not. But that's, yeah, some work can come out better than expected, and some, let's say, are a little bit disappointing, but still okay.
You ever go back to like a collection that you completed and come up with like new ways to enlarge that collection?
Yeah, there's always more ideas, but as it is quite time consuming, and let's say I made a collection of 16 wall hangings in the Shadow of a Doubt collection, and I was kind of done with it then. And then I'd like to try out new materials, new techniques, and then I got that damask loom, and I'd like it to be flexible, because I have so many different ideas, which I think all, let's say, connect to my personal style. They're all Theo weavings, and I'd like to explore more. And could be that, let's say, in a year of, I'm now weaving for 4 or 5 years, so not that long. And I'd like to, let's say, not to freeze in techniques that I'm doing now. So I'd like to explore more but could be that, let's say that in a year or 5, that my style is much more condensed and focused on a specific technique or specific color range. But also line, I'm always happy, let's say, to go back to a new collection, to start a new collection when I'm done with the previous one.
Are you ever afraid you're going to run out of ideas?
No, I think that's the least of my problems. But that's, I think, also because it's quite slow. I can make about, let's say, maybe 20 good artworks in a year. Yeah, and when I'm on the loom, that's my mind wanders and I get new ideas and I get inspiration on the streets every day. So no, I guess I will never run out of, let's say, ideas and inspiration. It's more like maybe, let's say, the motivation to start new things and to put the effort in making the artworks. Yeah, that might be something that might be a challenge later on.
Well, like when you think about it, you're basically new to the weaving, right? Like relatively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Do you feel like you're still a rookie? Do you feel like you still have like all the learning in front of you? Do you feel like you learned so much in such a short time that you became an expert on what you're doing? Where do you see yourself?
Yeah, I think I got good training, and as I can dedicate full time my energy to the weaving, I think I'm okay. But I still feel like a rookie and that I'm bluffing my way into this weaving world, because I often have visitors in my studio, and that these are people who weave maybe for 40 years already, and they are technically superb in their techniques. And when you look at my salvages, I think that a real pro would think, well, that could need improvement. But I guess I get away with that, calling myself a visual artist and not like a craftsman, a weaving craftsman. So I can get away with it a bit, like that you have photographers, technical photographers, and you have artists who use the technique of photography. So I'm more like in the second, whereas I think that all the fabrics that I make, they should be okay. So if you look at my weaves, I think that it's okay. And I'm not using many techniques. I learned many techniques in the basic, and I think that's like maybe 4 or 5 techniques that I come back to all the time, and I spend quite a lot of time with those techniques, and I think I kind of mastered those techniques. But I could never be, let's say, a weaving teacher, because there's many techniques that I don't really understand, or there's materials that I never work with. So I have, let's say, some specialism, but I'm not like an overall well-trained weaver there.
Well, when you're saying that you couldn't be a teacher, you could teach your way, right?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So what I could teach, I think is how you can, let's say, develop your own style and handwriting as a fiber artist or as a weaver. So how do I come from inspiration? How do I make sketches? How do I make samples? And from that samples, how do I decide to make a collection? And so that's something that I could, let's say, talk about, or I could maybe tutor some students to do that. I'm not that much interested in really, let's say, explaining all the details of my collections, because, let's say, that's my style. So I'm not, let's say, after people mimicking my style. Let's say the techniques that I use are really straightforward. I can really say, well, this is a double weave, and then people can play with double weave and find their own. I'd rather have people find their own signature than try to, let's say, do something in my style. That's one exception maybe, because I went to England to Jason Collingwood to do a masterclass in rug weaving. So I learned many tricks from him, how to make a good solid rug. And that's one thing that I sometimes do, is that I have a workshop of rug weaving, and then I pass on that knowledge about rug weaving. But then that's really on the techniques of rug weaving, and not so much on the design or my personal style in rug weaving.
Do you think like it's easy for people to learn weaving? Like, is there enough materials out there? How did you learn? Like, how did you approach learning, and how you approach it now? Like how you decide what you want to learn?
Yeah, so I must say that I was really lucky, because here in Rotterdam that was this weaving school. I went there 1 day a week, and they have a large collection of looms, and Cicero, the teacher, he taught all the techniques, and he taught me how to, let's say, prepare the loom. And that for me was an ideal way of learning, I think. But I know there's also people who just learn from YouTube videos, and I really admire that, because that would not be my style of learning. I need to see people doing things, and if I get into trouble, the troubleshooting is, I think that was the how do I say, that's why I was happy happy to be in the weaving school, because when something goes wrong, I could panic when I would be alone in my studio with all these threads who can get entangled, and how can I disentangle things. But then, yeah, after a few years of training, I'm confident, and now I can, let's say, solve everything myself, I think, and I can learn new things just by studying books or just watching videos. And one other important thing is that I now have a good network in the weaving world in the Netherlands. So if I want to start with a new material or a new technique, and I know someone who uses that material or that technique often, then I just go to him or her, or I talk to him or her, and then, yeah, we learn from each other. So it's such a warm and welcoming word, I would say, the weaving world, at least in the Netherlands. So we help each other out if we have problems. So with the damask, for instance, the damask loom that I have now, I am member of the Damask Weavers Guild in the Netherlands, and yeah, there's an abundance of knowledge there, so I can learn from them as well.
Well, the damask culture of weaving goes back to like centuries. Are you interested in historical background of it? Like, are you learning, do you go to museums to study what's been done and what you can do?
Nah, yes and no. So I really want to make things which are from now. So I want to understand the technique, but I was curious to see, let's say, what is the Dutch tradition of damask weaving. So I went to an expert to see which, let's say, are there any patterns or any colors or any things that were done in the past, which maybe I could give twist or use in a minimalistic way. But turned out that, let's say, all the things in the Netherlands, they came from abroad, and that made me less interested. Let's say, I must say, the only thing that I learned, let's say, from the history of damask weaving that maybe I will use in the future is that when you see damask on old paintings or let's say Last Supper paintings, for instance, that they're always folded with these pleats. They're not, let's say, ironed or mangled. They always have these folds, and that's a sum of that shows that you have good damask because it has been stored well and it was taken well care of. So it might be that I'm going to make some artworks with pleats or with folds in that. So that would be something that has a relation to damask weaving, but I will not work with, let's say, traditional patterns. I'm just making my own geometric, minimalistic designs, I think.
Well, for people who, like me, who don't know much about weaving, could you explain the difference between that damask loom versus like the looms that people used to seeing? Besides the fact that it's like, looks like a church organ.
Yeah, so I will try. So in essence, what you have in weaving, you have, let's say, these crossing threads. You have the warp and the weft. So when you, let's say, prepare your loom, you can install some patterns, but let's say throughout your fabric, you can use only the same pattern because you have your treadles, maybe 8 treadles. So you have 8 different options, and then you're stuck to that. Whereas with my damask loom, you could think of it as pixels of 4x4 threads. And during my weaving, I can, let's say, pull cords, and for each of these pixels of 4x4 threads, I can choose whether you mainly see the warp thread or the warp thread, the warp or the weft thread. And you can imagine when you work with different colors for the warp and the weft, you can choose which color the pixel gets. So you get some freedom throughout your design where the colors will be. You could even, so many damask weavers, they make figurative. So you can just have a pattern maybe from cross stitching or Mickey Mouse even, or a landscape or skyline, and you can weave that in 2 colors with these pixels, which is very time consuming because for each line you must see which threads to pull to get the pixels right. And I'm not sure if I'm too lazy, but maybe you saw on my Instagram that I mainly work now with diagonals in the damask weaving. And that's kind of, let's say, I have my 4 wefts, and then I just pull 1 cord on each side, and then I get 1 pixel more. So I have my algorithm again, and my play. So, but that's with the damask loom. Yeah.
How long it takes?
Does it make sense?
Yeah. Now, how long does it take you to prepare the loom for weaving?
Yeah, so that depends on how you work, but in general, like say my ordinary floor loom, I would say, it depends a lot of how many threads you have. But let's say for the wall hangings of the Shadow of a Dart collection, it took me I'd say 1.5 days or 2 days to prepare the loom, and then I could start weaving. The damask loom is a different thing, because when I got it new, it took a lot of maybe 2 months just to install it and get everything ready. But for now, I use always the same, let's say, thread and the same number of threads per centimeter. So what I do now, if I finish a piece, then I can, let's make with knots, I can make the new warp connected to the old warp, and then I can, yeah, so that's quicker. So then it takes me still 1.5 days, I think, but with the damask loom, it's many threads, and it can take ages if you do it not that way. So, but it's okay.
When you weave, what's in your head? Like, what are you thinking about? Like, are you planning the next project? Are you concentrating on technicalities of the weaving? Like, what are you thinking?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. It's often when I give demonstrations or I have an open studio or I am at a gallery, it's always people think, oh, this will be very relaxing or very meditative. But yeah, that's part of it. I can get into flow, and then just time passes and oh, end of the day. But yeah, it's kind of what I really like about the weaving, that it's using the brain and the hands and the feet. So all of my body is, let's say, involved, and sometimes I really need to do a lot of counting, and then it absorbs me totally. But and I do have a radio, I have music, or I have some talk radio on, but sometimes, because I tried audiobooks, for instance, but then I found out that sometimes, oh, I missed 5 minutes, or I missed something because I need to concentrate on the weaving. So yeah, it's quite a bit of concentration, because I always go for challenging patterns. If I would now, let's say, just make a plain fabric with just a twill or just a plain weave, I think I could do even talking to people, or let's say listening to that. But with the patterns that I make, I need to concentrate, because one of the most important things for me in weaving, and maybe that's also with knitting, I think, don't make mistakes, because if you make a mistake and you need to go back, that's a horrid thing to do. So avoiding mistakes is first, and then let's say try to speed up a bit, or maybe listen to some music or so.
What's your material stash looks like now in comparison to when you started?
It's always that you get more and more yarn, let's say, because you want to try out different colors, and with your sampling, there's also often a minimum amount that you need to get. And it's always like, I work with linen, for instance, for the Shadow of a Doubt, and the back you see there's some of the linen yarn maybe in the corner. And I thought, okay, yarn, really, this yarn is my material, this linen. But then after that collection, I found out that I felt for some other materials. And for instance, on the damask loom, it's very difficult to work with linen. So I'm working with mercerized cotton there, also because it's easier, but also because it's connected well to, let's say, the shine that I wanted to have in the parade collection, which should be festive and, let's say, colorful. And yeah, that really fit well with mercerized cotton. So then I got some cotton stash. So, and for their works, I use wool. So yeah, I have a growing collection of yarn.
Well, when you walk into your studio, what inspires you? What like gives you the ideas? Do you look at that yarn collection? Do you look at the looms? Like, what calls you?
Oh, I would say it's mostly when I walk out of the studio that, let's say, my journey for inspiration starts. Like, I have this big collection of photos that I made over the years, thousands of pictures with my fascinations, like, for instance, the shadows, and it's always with windows, and there's different themes that I come back to. And then when the inspiration is already there when I enter the studio, and then when I enter the studio, I know this is really it's a very nice place to be, where it's calm, and when there's concentration, and then it's here where I can work with my ideas. I can sit at the desk or on my computer, and yeah, sure, there's a moment where I take my yarns and I make my samples and try out things, and then it's good to have this collection of yarns in the studio.
What's life outside of the studio looks like? What else do you like to do?
Oh, okay. That I'm kind of struggling with that, because I'm a full-time visual artist only, let's say, for 3 years now. I always had a part-time job at university. So then I could say, okay, my job is at university, and the fun of life is in the weaving and in making art. But now that making art really has become my job, I need to think, okay, what else do I have which I really like? And well, I think it's running. I run for the movement and sports, and I really like reading a lot. And still, it would be enjoying arts, I think, going to a gallery and yeah, and then walking in nature. So yeah, just walking the streets and see what people are doing, observing what's going on in the city. I think that could also be one of my leisure favorites.
Well, since you started weaving, did your friends group change? Like, are you finding that the old friends struggle to understand what the heck you're talking about, all the looms and all the whelps and stuff?
No, I don't think so. No. Well, it was maybe, let's say, some former colleagues, because I quit my job there. Some of those people who might be kind of friends, you see them less often because you don't see them on a daily basis. I don't think I lost friends. And I think people, they knew me before and they knew my art already, and they really see a clear connection, let's say, for me and the art that I make. Like, they see me making the same kind of interesting art, so they bear with me. Some people maybe don't understand why weaving or yarn would fascinate me, but and well, they didn't tell me yet. I think it's mainly that I got new friends from starting with weaving, because I was building a network and I tried to be visible. For instance, also via Instagram. And I'm really surprised that you can so easily get in touch with new people and with weavers from all over the world, and that you can get in a conversation. And also then when I have an open studio here, that all kinds of people come and say, okay, I know you already from, for instance, Instagram. So making new friends, I guess.
Well, how was Instagram for you? Was it difficult for you to figure out how to make yourself visible, how to find those people who would like your art?
Yeah, I still find it difficult. I put quite some energy in it, because I think for me, it's important that, let's say, the quality of my Insta feed and the quality of my website, the quality of my newsletter should reflect the aimed quality of my artwork. So it should all fit. But yeah, I can still not always, let's say, estimate which post will be successful and interesting to other people. And I must say that I have quite a lot of followers, but these are all kinds of other weavers and yarn enthusiasts and art people. But of course, in the end, I'd like to reach the audience who are interested really in the end results of in the artworks, and who in the end would be interested in buying the artwork. So I'm trying really to do something with Instagram to, let's say, reach these people, which is a bit more difficult, I think, than reaching, let's say, fellow artisans.
Is it hard for you to figure out how to price your art? Because like, if you're weaving, let's say, a tea towel, it's sort of easier to calculate. Like when you're doing something that's unique art piece, it's becoming this, like, how much do I charge? Do I charge for yarn? Do I charge for time? Do I charge for my creativity? Like, is it difficult for you to figure out the pricing?
Yeah, it really is difficult, because yeah, I do some benchmarking. I look at other artists and I compare with, let's say, other disciplines in art, and I'm just finding out now what works and what doesn't work. And one of the pitfalls could be that, let's say, I price them too low in the beginning, because then you cannot, let's say, become more expensive, and then when you start to sell via galleries, they take quite a lot of the money, of course, and then the profit is too meager. So I'm not selling that much at the moment, but it's now, let's say, building reputation and visibility, and then hopefully then I can sell them for the price that I asked for. Now it's
Do
quite.
You have this like struggle, the artist struggle. You could make something that's easily sellable, right? Like the tea towels or like the rugs, or you can go into completely like, this is my artistic vision, this is what I'm gonna make. Do you ever have that inner struggle of like, what should I work on? Should I work on what's gonna definitely sell, or should I work on what brings me joy?
Yeah, well, I'm in the luxurious position that I can, let's say, choose to go for the things that I think are the things that I want to make, and which are joyful to make, and which I think are really good quality. But I must say that even when I was weaving towels, and when I would be calculating what would be the price that I would, or when I made scarves, then they would also be very expensive already when I calculated all my costs with the, let's say, the the time that it took me to make samples, making the design, renting the studio, all these things. And also because I took a lot of effort in, let's say, hand stitching in the end to make the finishing nice. Yeah, the price that I sold them for, but it still was not, let's say, profitable. Then I thought, well, maybe I think that if I can sell my artworks in the end, that it could be more interesting than, let's say, handmade towels and scarves, and could be related to the situation in the Netherlands, where maybe there's not a very good market for handmade applied textiles.
No, I think it's the fact that people see it as craft, people see it as something, well, you like doing it anyway, why won't you make me something? Or why would I pay you for a towel, whatever you're charging, when I can go and buy it at some little store for like $3, you know? It's like,
yeah, sure. Yeah, so that's the comparison. That's what can you buy in the store. And also I think maybe in textiles that, let's say, many people also do it not on a professional basis, but just do it, let's say, in their free time, and then they make it for friends and people, and just give it as a gift or give it away, or they maybe sell it for a very low price. And that's, I think, a different market that in a way I then would need to compete with, which might be difficult for people to understand that my work is more expensive because I try to make a living from it.
do you ever question your sanity at making the decision of going into weaving and instead of like doing something easier?
No,
like...
yeah, I'm really happy making the decision, because yeah, I was in teaching and doing research for years, and it feels like now I have, let's say, a new kind of life and an opportunity to have a new career, which I think I for a long time I did, let's say, 2 jobs at the same time. Part was at university, part was making art. And what happens then is that it becomes difficult. Let's say when it became difficult at university, then I thought, oh, let's focus more on art. And then when it becomes difficult in art, I would say, oh, but it's logical that my artworks will not be the best artworks in the world, because I always have my energy in the teaching and in the research. So now there's only one goal. So there's no escape, and it gives me some calm as well, because it's quite hard combining 2 jobs in a week. So no, I don't regret at all. There's a plan, so yeah, and everything goes according to plan now, but it means that, let's say, if you talk to me in 3 or 4 years, the things needs to have changed in comparison with now. So I need to sell more artworks and things like that. So, but I'm quite confident that that will happen.
Well, are you a planner in general? Like, do you think about future? Do you try to plan, like, and how far ahead are you trying to plan?
Yeah, I am a planner, but I'm learning that planning less makes me more flexible and makes, let's say, discipline is good, but too much discipline, let's say, can make me blind for opportunities that cross my path. So I'm learning there, like, but I like to work in collections. Like if I would say, okay, I make, let's say, isolated artworks, that would not satisfy me, because I work in collections. So, but in the first collection, The Shadow of a Doubt, which was 16 wall hangings, I kind of designed all 16 of them. And then there was a period of production, which was 3 months. So that was a totally planned project. Whereas in the latest collection, the Parade collection, which I wove under the damask loom, I just started with a series of 3 artworks. And then I saw what happened, and I learned from what happened on the loom. And based on these insights, I, let's say, designed the next artwork. And that really that way of working satisfied me very much. So I'm more flexible, but still working in projects.
Describe me your day. Like, how much time do you weave every day? Like, do you take breaks? Do you, like, when do you do your social media? When do you do other things, work out and stuff?
Yeah, so let's say there's a planning. I mean, at the start of the week, I always make planning, and in general, then that means that I would be 1.5 days for, let's say, administration, PR, spending time on the computer, I would say, and then there's 3.5 days to spend on weaving and projects. And then maybe half a day of that would be, let's say, for inspiration. I could go to a gallery or a museum, or just yeah, I could do whatever I like, and the rest of the time I spend in the studio. I'm very strict with lunchtime because I have a husband who, yeah, mainly due to COVID, works at home all the time, and as my home is only 5 minutes walking from my studio, I go there for lunch every day, 12:30, strict, to get some structure in the week and in the day. And then, yeah, I just work all day here. It depends on the phase I am in the project, if I'm spending lots of time with weaving or whether it's different things. Now I'm kind of like between projects. So I'm now sketching and going through my photo archive, and I've been ordering some yarns that I need for my next project. So yeah, so now it's a bit more, not that busy, but then when the actual weaving starts, it's always, I'm not in a rush, but it's always counting the centimeters that I can make in a day. For instance, I know that I can weave with a certain technique, like 10 centimeters per hour. Then I'm, let's say, only happy if I have woven 70 centimeters in the day, for instance. And then I can easily forget a break in the afternoon.
Well, do you ever like have hard time stopping yourself and like actually going home?
No, so that's one of the, let's say, big advantages, that I cannot take the loom with me. So when I go home, weaving stops. So it's sometimes in winter, I would say, oh, why can I, it would be nice to do something in the evening at home, but it's kind of a good, let's say, demarcation of the work for me, that, okay, when I'm in the studio, I can start early, I can make quite long days, but when I go home to make dinner, then it's finished. So yeah, that's a good, yeah, measure for me.
Is your husband allowed into the studio?
Yeah, 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 where he is, yeah. Yeah, but he's interested, and now and then he comes to have a look, but it's not that he's spending time here.
Have you tried teaching him how to weave?
No, I don't think he's interested. He has his own fascinations and hobbies and work. So now but he's interesting to know how, let's say, he's interested to see how I weave and what the structure is of my weaving, because then sometimes I ask for feedback, and then he's able to, let's say, react on the work that I'm making. And I'm really happy because my studio here it's an old school building, and downstairs there's a wonderful garden and the cafe and the gallery. So when he comes, we spend some time to go for coffee there in the garden, or just to have a look at the gallery. So it's a nice place for him also to be, but not actually really in my own studio.
Well, if I were to meet you like 5-6 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about weaving.
No.
Do you see something else happening drastically in your life in the future? Do you think weaving is to stay in your life forever?
Yeah, you never know. But I think, let's say, learning the weaving and having that dedication to, and the energy that I put into learning to weave, and the investment in setting up the looms, and I didn't make that decision overnight. I think I was a year in weaving school before I bought my first loom. So that was a conscious decision, and I know myself rather well. So I think that weaving will stay. I'm rather strict now that the only thing I do is to weave, also because I want to, let's say, develop and master the skills better. And yeah, as I said, weaving takes quite a lot of time. So I'm strict in that sense. And I can imagine that if you speak to me in 5 years, that I might do some more drawing again, because I still see a relation to the way that I make my drawings and that I make my weavings, and that, let's say, in 5 years or so, that I like the combination, or to be flexible with my techniques, and also maybe in selling works that I can sell drawings again and weavings and maybe other kinds of artworks that are, have the same, I would say they're all mine, that you can see they're my work, but with different techniques.
You have a dream about it? Like, do you have an idea of where you would like to take it?
Yeah, well, I think that I would, let's say, like to build my reputation as a visual artist, and then as a weaving visual artist. So my ideal would be that, let's say, my artworks that they sell, and that I can make my new collections that they find a public. And I'm really happy with the kind of exhibitions that I have this year. When I compare the quality of the exhibitions already to the ones that I had last year, I'm really happy. So if that continues, I'd be really happy, because I'd like to. First, I thought, okay, I'm happy when I can be weaving in my studio and I can just make my own works, and it doesn't matter if they just end up on my own wall or in my drawers. But now I find it really very rewarding if I can share my artworks in galleries or in a museum or anything, and even more that people find them fall in love with them so much that they want to have them in their own homes or own places to look at them every day. So that's really rewarding. So I hope that I can be successful in that respect.
Well, you know how like you can go to museums and see some examples of weaving from earlier centuries. If few hundred years from now, somebody would find your weaving in the museum, which piece would you want it to be?
I think that it's always, let's say, the latest works that I'm most enthusiastic about, because they're like fresh from the loom. So some of the ones that are made on the damask loom I really like. But I think that the Shadow of a Doubt collection is, I would say, more mature, and it connects really well with the way, it's really my own signature there. With the damask loom, that was my first collection, and I'm really looking forward building on that collection. So there will be newer works in the future that I think I would be proud of, and they were in the museum, but until now it will be the works from the Shadow of a Doubt collection.
You remember like how that idea occurred? Like what picture, what photograph, or what like image sparked that idea for the Shadow of the Doubt collection?
Yeah, well, I just took all my pictures that I made with shadows, and then I made some categories and analysis, and I learned that, let's say, when let's say a structure gives a shadow on a surface behind that, then it gives depth. So then I learned, okay, with shadows I can create depth, and in the Shadow of Doubt collection, you should see an image of it, because it might be difficult to envision what it looks like. But I have, let's say, these bars, these horizontal and vertical bars in different colors, and these colors I selected also, again, to add more depth. So if you see the picture, it's colors and shadows which form depth. And then for me as a weaver, there's, let's say, much more things interesting, because it's a so-called double weave, and I chose to make a double weave because with a double weave I can make boundaries between colors. So there I could again make some colors come to the front and some may go to the back. So the technique really fits well with the composition, and also the colors seem solid colors, but when you come close you can see that they're mixed colors from warp and weft. And that was also kind of a puzzle before. What colors can I make with the yarn that I have available and the weaving technique? So I'm happy that I pulled it off, because it was kind of a puzzle, which is not visible to the viewer, which is okay, because I think that the picture itself, it stands for itself. But for me, there's more to it.
Well, when you see work of other artists who weave, like, what do you concentrate on? Do you look at it critically? Do you look at it like, oh, I could have done a better job? Do you find some new techniques that you don't know? Like, how do you look at that?
Yeah, I must say that's quite a lot of weavings that I don't find attractive, because it's just personal taste, and I'm just the one that likes geometric shapes and clear compositions, and I'm not like for the totally organic, so I don't try to have an opinion on that and don't look at it too much, because that's for other people. So, but then when I see something popping up with this geometric, I become curious, and I can really be jealous for some weavers, because then I think it's a wonderful composition. And also I like it that I know that it's better because it's woven than had it been just a painting. So there should be something extra in the structure or in the technique that makes it relevant as a fabric or a textile. And I'm always trying to find out how it's made and what technique is used. And that's all. My looms are so-called shaft looms, and my looms have a maximum of 10 shafts. And I admire weavers who make, let's say, minimalistic and new things with a limited number of shafts. That for me is some kind of a challenge. So just do something with a well-known, easy technique, but still something which hasn't done before, which is, let's say, striking. And then when I see something where you think, oh, how has that been done? And I'm curious, and then I learn that it's like, let's say, 32 shafts. I lose a bit of my interest there, because it's very, I couldn't do it. It's very time consuming and difficult to make. So I can only applaud that, But for me, the challenge is in different things of the weaving. So that's what I look for. Oh, is this something, let's say, with a simple technique, I would say, but still with a personal signature. So it's not only technique, but it should be something creative in the technique of the weaver.
Well, do you find the weaving community supportive in that way? Like you mentioned that you have your own style and you're not necessarily interested in teaching other people how to mimic it. Do you find like other people willing to share their knowledge?
Yeah, I think so. And I'm always also willing to share the knowledge. If people ask what technique is it, or how many shafts, or what material do you use, or how many threads per centimeter, I'm always willing to share that information, and others do that as well. So if I'm curious and I ask a weaver something, there always comes, I think there always comes an answer. And I like that, very much. I don't think that's really secrets in that respect.
Right. Well, I mean, I think it's very important not to keep those secrets, because it's like, this is how we all can grow as a community, you know. Like I find that when people try to keep secrets of certain technique, that technique is gonna die really fast, because like
and I'm not even that scared that people would copy my artworks or try to see if they can make it, because okay, it's not, let's say, a competition for me. If they succeed, that's fine, because I think the value of my artworks are there because they're part of my oeuvre, and because I have my story behind it. And if you can see all my collections, you can see that they fit together. If someone is interested in one of the patterns, then okay, if you want to make it, then you can try. But I think that for me at least, one of the wonderful things in weaving is that you can make your own choices. You can pick your own colors, and there's so many possibilities in just one different petal, and you get another structure, or you get another pattern. So I would like weavers to play with that and find their own signature, because I think that's, for me at least, that's so rewarding. So I don't always understand why people would like to mimic things.
Well, if somebody came to you and asked for your advice, like if they were considering becoming a full-time artist in weaving, right? Like, would you, after being in it for like few years, would you tell them keep your day job and do it on the side, or would you tell them jump deep end in?
I would think if someone wants to be a visual artist, go for it. And could also be later in life. Could be that you do something else first, and then later in life just grasp the opportunity to become a visual artist. Weaving, if you should ask yourself, why do I choose weaving? Because it's not, let's say, the easiest or the most flexible one. So I can remember that when I was a visual artist about 10 years ago, I always said, oh, I'm so happy that I'm not a painter, because a painter always needs to take the paint and the canvas and always painting, because in that time I was working with dyes and with tape, and I made drawings, and I was very flexible. And in that period, I really loved that. And a little part of me regrets that now I have one technique that I work with. So if you decide to be a weaving visual artist, you really need to be, I would say, quite sure that you know why weaving fits you, why it is. Because I know quite a lot of weavers who start enthusiastically and they buy a loom, and then after a year they sell it already, because as I said, it's kind of monk's work also. And before you can start a weaving, there's quite a lot of preparations that you need to do. And I think you need to like all the aspects of the process. And so try it out before you make the decision.
I mean, is there like any part of that process that you dread?
I often have one thing that I dread, but then when I think about it a few months later, then it can be a different one. But it's what I dreaded before was, let's say, beaming the warp on the loom, because that is adventurous. And if that goes wrong, it can be a disaster. But now I'm confident in that, so that I don't dread anymore. The thing I dread now is that you have the warp on the loom, and you put each thread through a header and to the reed, and then you need to tie them on to the front lath. And I don't like that, because it needs to have even tension, and you make definitely all these knots, and that's one of the things that I dislike the most, I think, at the moment.
Right. Well, how can my viewers help you find a wider audience?
So yeah, just share what you see. That would be great. Or comment on my, yeah, follow me on Instagram, because that would be my main channel, I think. Or subscribe to my newsletter and share that newsletter with others. Yeah, just share my work and give comments, because I also find out that how more lively the interactions are on, let's say, the social media, the more willing the algorithm is to, let's say, show your work to others. So that helps. And yeah, so if you're in the Netherlands, you can visit me in the studio, or yeah, tell others that I'm here. And if you like my work, tell others.
Well, we're gonna put all the information how to find you under the description of this video, and you guys should go and follow Theo and,
Oh, great. Yeah.
say hi from Fiberchats.
Okay.
Well, thank you so much for being my guest today. I really enjoyed chatting with you.
Yeah, thank you for inviting me, because I went through, let's say, the history of your speakers, which were very interesting people, and I think with an emphasis on knitting. I was looking for some more weavers, but I really like it that you wanted to talk to me as a weaver from the Netherlands. So thank you very much for having me.
My pleasure. Thank you for being my guest.